The three of them bowed at once. Not a courteous nod, not a diplomatic incline of the head, a full, formal bow. The Empress of the Silari Continuum, her daughter, and the High Counselor of the Galactic Assembly, all folding toward a man who had misplaced his travel itinerary twice that morning. Kalen Vance did not move. He wasn't sure he remembered how. The data pad with his reassignment orders had still been warm from the printer 6 days earlier, when the biggest problem in his life was a misfiled cargo manifest on Deck 9. Kalen had expected a small room, a round table maybe, a cultural exchange between the Terran Logistics Division and the Solari Continuum was, by every definition on record, a second-tier diplomatic function. The kind of assignment handed to competent, unremarkable people who wouldn't embarrass anyone. He was competent. He was unremarkable. He had been told this, in slightly kinder language, at his last 3 performance reviews. The Apex Sanctum was not a small room. The ceiling vaulted 100 feet overhead, carved from pale asteroid stone threaded with bioluminescent ore. Kalen's footsteps echoed against the floor as he crossed it, and he became acutely aware that his left gauntlet, standard-issue synthetic leather, slightly scuffed at the knuckle, looked deeply out of place here. He kept it on anyway. He always kept it on. The mark underneath was the kind of thing that made people stare, and the last thing a logistics worker needed in a room like this was people staring at his wrist. Empress Valia stood at the far end, flanked by High Counselor Theron and the Princess Silari. Kalen had read their briefing files, where he had memorized the correct honorifics. He had practiced the Silari greeting gesture in his bunk the night before, feeling ridiculous. He never got the chance to use it. The moment he stepped past the threshold, Silari's posture changed. A sharp intake of breath, her fingers tightening at her sides. Her eyes fixed on him with an intensity that had nothing to do with protocol. Whatever she saw, it was not what he was. Empress Valia turned to her daughter once, reading something in her face that Kalen could not. Then quietly she dismissed the guards. All of them. The room emptied until only the 4 of them remained. 3 Silari and 1 very confused human, whose palms had started to sweat inside his gloves. "Envoy Vance," the Empress's voice carried without effort. "Remove your left gauntlet." Kalen's mouth went dry. "Shri, pardon?" She did not repeat herself. She simply waited, with the specific patience of someone who has never needed to ask twice for anything in their life. His fingers found the strap. He pulled. The birthmark on his wrist had been with him since birth, a pale, irregular shape that no dermatologist had ever successfully categorized. He had long ago accepted it as the kind of genetic accident that meant nothing, a smear of discoloration, an anomaly, nothing more. It began to glow, faint at first, then steadier, a cold blue-white luminescence that traced the mark's edges, like circuitry waking from a very long sleep. Kalen stared at his own wrist. He had never seen it do that before. He had never seen it do anything before. High Counselor Theron moved closer, and something shifted in his bearing. A stillness that felt less like surprise and more like the particular gravity of a person confirming what they had already feared. "The glyph of the ancients," Theron said. It was not a question. The light on Kalen's wrist pulsed once, steady and quiet, like a second heartbeat. And that was the moment, before anyone explained what any of it meant, before the cartograph lit up the room with 40 active wars, before Kalen understood it, his entire career as a logistics worker had somehow, impossibly, been prologue. That was the moment the 3 of them bowed. Nobody explained it gently. Empress Valia crossed the room and pressed a single finger to a recessed panel in the wall. The stone parted. A stellar cartograph expanded into the air between them. Not a flat projection, but a living architecture of light, layered and deep, showing the galaxy's wounds in real time. Red threads marked active conflicts. There were many, far too many. 43 resource wars, Theron said quietly. 11 border erasures, species that signed binding accords 3 centuries ago, now burning each other's stations. Kalen looked at the map, then at his wrist, then at the map again. I filed cargo manifest, he said. It came out smaller than he intended. Empress Valia did not acknowledge this. The Prime Accord was not a document. It was a living covenant, witnessed, sealed, and anchored to a bloodline. Yours. She paused. The signatory species do not need a general. They need to be reminded of what they already promised. Nahani living witness carries a weight no tribunal can replicate. Kalen understood the logic. He did not like it, but the mark on his wrist was still glowing, steady as a fixed star, entirely indifferent to his feelings on the matter. In the weeks that followed, he learned what questions could do that weapons couldn't. He sat across from a Vareth Council elder who had not spoken to a Solari delegate in 40 years and asked him simply, "What did your grandfather believe this treaty was protecting?" The elder went quiet for a long time. Then he answered. Kalen asked a Drenali fleet admiral why she was willing to die for a mineral corridor her own charter identified as shared territory. The admiral looked at the glyph on his wrist and, for the first time, looked uncertain. He didn't command anyone. He didn't threaten. But he just carried the mark and asked the questions that nobody with power had bothered to ask, because power rarely sees the need to ask. Silari walked beside him through most of it, quiet, watchful, occasionally translating not just language but intent. She never explained what she had seen in his face that first day in the sanctum. He never asked. Some things were better held than examined, and then it was the hangar. The same cold light, the same recycled air, the same scuffed gauntlet folded in his jacket pocket because there was no longer any reason to wear it. Silari stopped a few feet from the boarding ramp. Her hands were clasped behind her back, posture formal, but her eyes tracked the gauntlet's outline through the fabric in a way that was not formal at all. "You could stay," she said. It was stated as information, and not a request. "I know," Kalen said. He boarded anyway. The ship climbed through the atmosphere and kept climbing, until the planet beneath became a curve of pale color, and then nothing visible at all. Kalen sat with his wrist resting on his knee. The glyph dim now, not extinguished, just quiet, the way something rests between uses rather than disappears. He turned his hand over once, studying the mark in the low cabin light. It looked the same as it always had, pale, irregular, unimpressive. He reached into his pocket and set the gauntlet on the seat beside him. Left it there. Didn't put it back on. The stars outside the viewport did not care. They burned the way they always burned. Ancient, indifferent, and extraordinarily patient with the small things moving between them.